one thing that I think would be a bit of an alarmist on some level for most justice situations. But he did bring up the point whether we have in our churches the evacuation plan, and is that clearly understood? And I think that is actually something that we all need to sort of think about and have some kind of plan that is explicit to, especially to the ushers, that they understand. Because I had a situation where actually there was a fire alarm did go off in the middle of the service, in the middle of my sermon actually. And I don't know, we just kind of went on, we went through, and then it was a false alarm. But the issue was brought up, after the service is like, what if it had been a real fire? What kind of plan do we have? So we did actually write out evacuation plan and distribute it to all the ushers and all the staff, and so that at least they know in the event of a real fire, or at least fire alarm, just in the middle of my sermon, I had no choice. What I should have done was, evacuate them in some way. The other is, we did have also an elderly gentleman who came near having a heart attack. He actually passed out. And so what do we do? Like there were children in the congregation, and our Sunday school teacher was quick enough that she rounded up little children very quickly and just took them all into the parish hall, and then we dealt with it, and somebody called the ambulance and all that stuff. But you also need to actually sort of think about, because we do have a lot of elderly in the congregation. Anything can happen, and those two things happened to me in the middle of a service. And the person we were very lucky to have a couple of the emergency volunteers. One of my very Eucharistic ministers is actually one such person, that he actually has a little phone that he carries around all the time, and he called the ambulance, nearby ambulance immediately, and they came and took care of the situation. He was rushed to the hospital. It was okay, but then some of those procedural things I think is really important, at least to have it written down somewhere, and especially the ushers understand and know that. So other than that, yes, some of the violence that he was graphically describing, it can't happen, but
it's kind of out of a Jason Bourne movie.
Exactly. I know. But we did have a nursery school actually, and we did go through. I remember going through the whole security plan, and then creating some locks on the doors and stuff. But it isn't, especially after the Connecticut shooting, and we brought home a lot of people. So anyway, thank you very much for gathering and inviting me. I found that actually this gathering a wonderful way of sort of having an opportunity to sort of have more personal interaction with clergy in this diocese, and to know, to hear from you what your concerns are, and what's going on in your life, in your parishes.
Hello.
While we do have, oh hi.
Excuse me, hi, sorry.
This is Cooper Conway from.
Yes.
Come on here.
Okay. Well, Albert and I had lunch yesterday, and you brought up a wonderful topic that I hadn't really thought about, and that was adult formation and lay leadership. And I don't. What? Hold on a second. Just say rehearse. Wow!
Every time we call.
I'm looking at Chuck. The devil in him there. Well, I guess there's not much interest in that particular subject.
Adult what? What? Beta team? What are you talking about?
Putting it better out.
Well, you know, I mean, I'm still finding my way. I just arrived about 6 weeks ago, but, you know, there's enormous lay talent in the community doing all sorts of things. You know, Jack Banning's doing amazing outreach, looking at how community service can help to renew rural parishes. And I was just asking Matt if there was a program. We had an EFM program in the parish I worked before, but, you know, a combination of maybe some of the community service training that your parish is involved in, EFM, and lay Eucharistic ministers. But just a way to kind of pull that together on a county-wide level, and what resources could the diocese provide if some parishes wanted to do that?
One of the things that we're working toward, and it's going to take some time to organize and implement this, is we have like the Eucharistic training programs and so on. It's just that so far it's all been done mostly at the cathedral or you know, occasionally at different locations. I think what we're working on what I'm working on with the Christian Formation Committee is start building video libraries, and which can be, you know, done and downloaded by anybody, any parish priest, anywhere can download, say, five classes on the Eucharistic ministry. You've got 2 people in your congregation that want to do it, so well, there you are. You know, there is that class that you can just teach, or they can actually, some of it probably can be self-taught. Another way would be several congregations, in nearby congregations, like Poughkeepsie's 3 congregations, can come together and say, you know, we've got 2, you've got 1, we've got 1, come together, you've got 4 people who are interested in the Eucharistic ministry. You can put a class together for 4 or 5 people. So that's the kind of stuff that we're envisioning. And as I said, it's going to take a bit of time. But in the meantime, we do have lay Eucharistic ministry training programs. And it is only offered, how long is that actually offered? Do you know how often?
Well, I've done 2 of them. One in Staten Island just about 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
Another one in Rockland County about 6 months ago. Yeah.
The region up here usually does one once a year.
Once a year.
But there's 2 things. I've done it for about 15 years. I think there's 2 things with that. I think for Eucharistic ministers, I think there's some basic material that could easily be done with a video. But it seems to me that those who are being licensed to serve communion, it's so particular to the congregation. That's one thing. I think what the need is for Eucharistic visitors, and it has some kind of an ongoing program, maybe a couple times a year, where people who are involved in this kind of ministry could really pick up some of the pastoral training that's needed,
Right.
and, you know, to do, whether it's case studies or, you know, do that kind of reflection and problem solving in terms of what happens on pastoral visits. But I think there's a lot of Eucharistic ministers, floating Eucharistic visitors that probably could benefit from that.
How many of you have lay Eucharistic visitors in your parishes?
We just commissioned about 12. I was
Yeah.
surprised.
Really?
My son was like, got the whole list.
Yeah.
Really?
And
Wow.
last night, last Sunday, and gonna start sort of doing the sending forth thing. I did inform them because the diocese had included a sort of how-to, and here's the guidelines, that they're only instructed to take the bread, not the wine.
Huh? Yeah.
That's the old,
This was in, you know, this is the official word. And
Really?
Yeah.
I have
Maybe
to-
that needs to be
do
updated.
you know?
I don't,
The
because
history of
I've been teaching them to do both. I
I've
have,
never
and
used
because,
this diocese.
Well, there's a official diocesan guideline for
Really?
Eucharistic
I have not seen
visitors
that.
and Eucharistic ministers.
Then maybe
You
dated.
should take a
For,
look at it.
for Eucharistic ministers, the diocese has a funny thing about,
This
you
is
know.
visitors.
only
And it
certain
explicitly
ones.
says the clergy are supposed to be the ones serving, you know. No communion kits, just the pigs.
That's a quirky
my
thing that got in there
Yeah.
last year.
Well,
it's totally different from the practice. You
well,
know,
that's
for
what
years.
I sort of told the group, and they
Yeah.
go, well, that's not what Mass
No,
said.
That's
And
the,
I said, well,
in
defer
fact,
to,
I ordered kits,
well, that's what I,
and,
you know.
you know, I've used those kits for years.
So, anyway, that, there is then a discrepancy.
that might be a dated Anglo-Catholic practice, actually. Because oftentimes in the Anglo-Catholic practice, they don't do wine, they take the pigs and the bread, like even the clergy. Rarely do drink or get and do that. So
This was
it might
included
be
with the
hangover from that.
licenses, you know, that came from the diocese.
Well, I'll take a look at that, yeah. Yes, the visitors training is a bit more involved because, and I don't know, are they required to do the safe church training?
Good question.
No.
No,
They
I
should.
don't think they're required.
Are they required to do the safe church training?
It must be part of the training, I think. That's how they do it in Long Island.
Okay,
And
makes sense.
yeah, and oftentimes, part of the training that they have to go through is usually can be also be done through internet anyway. So it doesn't have to necessarily, there's a way to do that. But it doesn't make sense to do that. But yes, one of the sort of things that I'm envisioning is actually, I'm about to sort of send out a message to all the heads of the ministry committees, like Christian Act Committee, Congregational Development Commission, Stewardship Committee, Evangelization Committee, and whatever else committees we have. I want to bring them together and get them talking to each other, and then developing programs where they can help each other, and so that we can work together, and you know, what will be much more useful than rather than each committee working in silos in their own little kingdom. It makes sense to me, right? So that's on my agenda for early next year, to bring them all together and say, let's talk how we can share, and so that we can have the same vision and work off the same page. You know, rather than each committee doing its own turf thing.
I don't know if the region still does it, but for decades in this region, we used to have an annual vestry training school,
Yes.
which was, I found valuable. Not only for the laity, but also for clergy coming into this diocese from out of New York State. The New York State has some very peculiar
Yes.
religious corporation laws. The clergy who come from Connecticut, San Diego, will be totally unaware of. And you can get into
Yeah, I don't know.
difficulty if you don't know about it.
I don't know if you do know, and those who are from other states, New York and a couple of other New England states have religious corporations law. It's actually quite strict and pretty wide. I mean, each denomination has its own section. The Episcopal Church section is like 50 pages long. It's pretty. One of the important things is I just recently encountered is that any office holders on the vestry, wardens, treasurer, and clerk, those are legal officers. of the corporation, they must be confirmed Episcopalians, not just baptized Christian. So if they came from Roman Catholic Church, been a member of your church for 20 years, but have not properly received into the Episcopal Church, they cannot be a warden. That is the law of the state. You have to carefully check that.
If they've been received but not confirmed, or
No, if
If
they have
they've been received.
if they've been attending your church for 20 years, and they have not been
received, okay.
or confirmed in the Episcopal Church, they are not eligible to hold any of those 4 offices. And a lot of people don't know that. And it's really important to sort of,
That's smart work.
Yeah, exactly.
Vestry training school.
the vestry training, and I think we have wardens training coming up. I think I've heard from Blake that there is a vestry training scheduled next year. But more and more, I think what we need to demand actually, and do more of, actually bring it out into the local areas. You know, the cathedral is a good, nice space and serves its purpose well, but up here, you know, it's hard. So yeah, so I'm a big advocate for these things to go out where it is needed.
Yeah, because I know I took the vestry training many decades ago, and we had like 3 sessions, and it was like 2 or 3 hours each time, and it was very well. It was excellent, and
But the other thing
very
is that
informed
there's a
as
lot
to-
of resource out there, especially Episcopal Church Foundation, which I'm sure you all know.
Guys.
And there's they put out a whole new vestry paper, vestry leadership guide, is it?
Yeah.
Which is actually better than I think that the old vestry handbook,
Hmm.
which is much more updated and talks a lot more about mission and ministry rather than, you know. So, and then they also do come out and do consultation work too, so.
And it also seems to me that, for instance, if having to train wardens constantly in terms of like clergy compensation, you know, if there was just an ongoing course, or even a video that talked about clergy compensation packages, for
They're part of this
instance.
video, that part of the vestry training school.
Yeah, the part of this warden's training.
And especially for wardens, because you're usually doing the negotiation with wardens. But, you know, it seems to me that my wardens change constantly. You know, we've only got a 3-year period and that's it, and you're out. And, you know, so you're constantly dealing with new wardens. But I think that's one of the major issues that ought to be addressed.
Your wardens are elected for 3-year terms?
Yeah.
That's against the Religious Corporations Act.
No,
Yes.
Yeah,
A 2-year term.
2-year terms.
2 terms.
yeah, I think our wardens are 3. We're incorporated before that.
Yeah.
For 2 years.
They're 2-year for wardens.
2 years for
2
wardens.
years for wardens and 3
years
for
for
vestry.
vestry. Yeah.
Well, then Trinity's bylaws are wrong and somebody else can. I inherited it. But anyways, which would even be worse because anyways. But I think that's one of the issues
It
that
is,
ought to
it
be
is.
included. And also things like insurance. I don't think that's necessarily covered. You know, it seems to me that you might be able to do some topical stuff. That would be helpful. I know there's a lot in this area that's going on in, what's her name? Maria Wainwright, did a lot of coordinating the finances for a lot of people. We developed at one point a chart of accounts that really sort of it does the work for you for the program report.
Yeah.
And I think about 8 congregations here are using it. Because Christ Church uses it. No?
Not
Okay.
last year anyway, not that I knew of.
But anyways, you know, there's a lot of that kind of sharing that can be done.
There was also a part of this diocesan guidelines included with the licenses that said, it was talking about licensed or non-licensed lay preachers. And what's the, in terms of that, what's the diocesan?
We don't really have licensed lay preachers, as far as I know, in this diocese anymore. That's the old, we used to have what we call lay readers. That's the old terminology, you know, who were properly educated, informed, and then were licensed to be able to teach and preach. We don't really have that anymore. There is, Bishop Ditch and I have had a passing conversation about that. And in some small rural congregations, we may have a need for that, but on the whole, we really, you know, we have enough clergy and deacons around that we don't really have a dire need for it. But there are situations occasionally where we do it, especially, I guess, where we go into shared ministry models, such as like out in Western New York, Pennsylvania. So where, you know, we'll basically, there is no extra clergy to go around except one and a quarter person, a priest and a deacon, and 3 or 4 churches. We may have a need for a lay leader in that kind of situation. But this diocese hasn't really dealt with it yet. But
Well,
yeah.
It does seem that there's some, you know, parishes that, you know, have part-time clergy.
Yeah.
You know, the lay leadership needs to be supported, and, you know, not licensed and all that, at least sort of trained and affirmed as a leadership
One of the,
role.
what I do here is that I've had about 4 clericus conversations so far, as the 5th one. Lay leadership lay training has been one of the forefront in vestry, warden, and also lay minister training, lay leadership training. That seems to be one that is really sorely needed. I felt it when I was a parish priest on Long Island. I kept saying literally every other day, I said, I wish diocese would just create some of these lay leadership programs, you know, and make my life so easy. Because, you know, when you're a solo priest, you don't have time to like train literally every program. I mean, you know, you don't. Yes, I mean, it is something that Bishop and I have been talking about, and Jacob Smith, who is the chair of the Christian Formation Committee, we've had several meetings, in which I really pressed this and said we really need to develop some programs available to parish priests who can just use it, you know, and not have to create everything from scratch. Basically, what you're doing is just reinventing the wheel all the time. You know, and there are. I'm also. I've been having some conversation with the person in charge of EFM program, Eswani. And one of the things I conveyed to her was that, well, EFM is a wonderful program. It works for a certain segment and certain type of people. It's a 4-year-long commitment. But it would be great if you offered alternative short programs. And I said, no more than 4 to 5 classes. Beyond that, I don't know about you, my experience is that, you know, 3 to 4 is about the maximum lay people will commit. 5 if it's Lent. 6, you'll get mixed groups. Beyond that, forget it. Yeah, that's my experience, and I don't know what yours is, but I think it's pretty much right on. And I told her, the ones that are out there, I've used the Methodist program, the scripture. There's a Methodist program. There's famous Kerygma, and there's always 7 or 8 class sessions. I just, you know, I used a couple They have two, there are 6 classes that I use that, but that's a stretch. 8 classes, and I said, I can't use this, I cannot commit them. And I told her that, I told this person then, I said, if you can come up with 3 to 4 class courses as an alternative, it'll be a real hit with parish priests. And she heard me out there. And also do the seasonal thing, because we are a seasonal church, you know. And you know, if you want to do an Advent program, basically you've got at most 3, maybe 2. You know, Lent is 4 to 5, right? And then so, you know, you've got Easter. Well, Easter maybe you can do 4 perhaps. You know,
Epiphany has a nice.
Epiphany is another one. It's nice,
6 or 7.
depending upon what it is. That you can't do. You know, you can do 5 during Epiphany, but you know, there's a weather bit as well. If wherever you know, I did a wonderful Epiphany program one year. It just went to shambles because of the snow. I had to cancel 3 of them. So, and I told her all this, and I think she understood what I said. So, hopefully, they'll come out with an Episcopal program that's really usable in the parishes within the next year or 2. That we can. It'll be fantastic.
I don't think it'll come from Sewanee. It's gonna have to come from somewhere else.
No,
I
it'll come
agree. You think
Sewanee.
Sewanee will do it?
EFM. EFM is housed at Sewanee.
Right.
And they're thinking about expanding their branching
I'm
out.
glad to hear that. I thought they were pretty married to the 4-year thing.
No. They'll continue the EFM program, the 4-year
Right.
thing, but they're studying new
Okay, good.
things on the side. I didn't know this, but EFM basically is funding the divinity school, the seminary.
Wow.
Oh.
It is a big moneymaker.
Good program.
Yeah, I know. I didn't realize it. She said
Yeah.
EFM is subsidizing the seminary. It's that big.
We need to come up with a leadership program, license it, and subsidize
Absolutely,
our region.
absolutely. You know, we probably could, yeah.
Bishop,
Yeah.
one topic that you've
Go to the
heard,
concert.
one topic you've heard brought up at the Dean's meeting and that there's interest here.
Yeah.
Concerns the organization of our deaneries and our clericus functions within our respective counties and areas. I've reported on the more extended conversation that took place at the Dean's meeting a couple months ago.
Yeah.
Just in terms of questioning whether county boundaries are sufficient or whether we should go across the river or have cities clericus together and rural parishes clericus together, but that might be a good point of conversation for us to get your thoughts and for others to offer you their thoughts on the clericus, its purpose, and what the heck. It used to be Dutchess County in the Dark Ages.
All of Dutchess County.
County
Yeah.
gathered Friday mornings at Christchurch, Poughkeepsie. And it was year after year after year. And then in the late 60s, the diocese went through one of its regular reorganizations. And things called parish council.
Parish council, inter-parish council.
Inter-parish councils were
Yeah.
formed, but they included the clergy of a parish and 2 or 4 lay representatives
Right.
Yeah.
from each,
Yeah.
from that.
Yeah.
And so that made too large a group of people
Yeah.
to get together, so they split it into Eastern Dutchess, Southern Dutchess, Poughkeepsie, and Northern Dutchess. That's where the deaneries eventually came from. Because when the councils died out, then the arrangements still continued. That's just the history of it.
The IPC is still functioning in the Bronx, Harlem, and Staten Island. I noticed they still call it IPC.
We
The
still
rest
call
of
it,
it,
we call it that in our parish for the people. We pray for a different one of the churches in the area.
you know, I think
No, it
that,
wasn't functioning.
I think that this sort of I mean, on some level, this clericus structure has to be sort of somehow regulated in terms of how, you know, it's on the diocesan functional level. But locally, I would say it's really up to you, you know. I mean, I had, when I was in Long Island, my parish was Huntington, Long Island, which is just across the Nassau County into the Suffolk County. So we were just on the other side of Nassau and Suffolk. And we had more in common with Nassau County than the rest of Suffolk, both socially, economically, you know, just people. Huntington was sort of the last of the Gold Coast, the end of North Shore Gold Coast. So we had, people there had more in common with people in Lloyd Harbor and Cold Spring Harbor, you know, all this more Nassau kind of people. So I told you know, Bishop Provenzano, and I said, you know, my parishioners have to, and their children do more stuff with parish, you know, people of the other parish rather than the rest of the, you know, my deanery. And Bishop said, well then go join that deanery, join Nassau County Deanery if that's what it is, and it doesn't matter. You know? And I think he's right. It really doesn't matter, and it's much more beneficial for you to be part of a deanery that is much more similar to your parish makeup than sort of strictly following this diocesan guideline boundaries. So, and then it's not like we have such a. It's not like the deans are doing a whole lot anyway. No, I'm just kidding. No, the deans, not like the old days where deans really had a proper dean's function, you know, where deans actually oversaw, had almost like a bishop's jurisdictional hand and eye. Those days are gone, you know, and deans are much more sort of, you know, creating fellowship and more creating a sense of community and fellowship among clergy, especially, I think, rather than any sort of jurisdictional oversight per se. And all communication channel from bishop to the clergy, I think that's another function. So I would say, you know, I mean, if you see somebody in northern Westchester which you think is better suited here, well, coach them.
When deans were asked to be elected in the areas of diocese under Bishop Bryan, and I was one of the first deans in that organization, and basically it was this: Bishop Bryan had, this is what I would like the clergy should know in your area, and the dean would then take that information back.
Yeah.
But I went the other way. The clergy would tell the dean, this is what we want the bishop to know, and would go the other way.
Yeah.
And that's what it was.
Yeah. A big, I mean, I'd probably jump in if it is, but I think a big part of your job is really communication is a very one important factor, and the other is a person who brings a fellowship together. And also, I mean, there are times I'm sure where you get involved in local, you know, parish issues, but that's rare, I think, on the whole nowadays. It's not like the, you know, sort of Church of England archdeacons, or just Susan Howard's novel, archdeacons, you know, that kind of thing. We don't have that anymore. So I would say it's fine for this clericus boundaries to be a bit more fluid. And I think I would find it perfectly fine.
Well, one concern, this was raised, I guess when I first got here, and there was like 3 deaneries, and it seems like Dutchess County is a nice deanery. We've got a good group here. I don't know all of you yet. at least you get, 10 people coming to a
Yeah.
lunch and we get to talk.
right.
And so for the fellowship and communication role, that seems good.
Yeah.
It seemed awkward or not working so well in so many parishes in transition to have too many, as Betsy Fisher was saying, well, it's just you and me, let's have a clericus, we were having one. But it's interesting, in Connecticut, involved in restructuring deanery conversations, because there were, 17 of them, and most of them non-functional, especially since confirmation was no longer regional and it wasn't much. But the idea was to, get fewer and bigger, and maybe give them resources to have somebody like a missioner or a missionary, a community organizer, who would help coordinate common mission. And in this case, I'm thinking of, there's a number of clergy, for instance, Jose Martinez, who might be part-time Latino ministry, unable to attend something like a clericus on a Tuesday afternoon. But how do we connect a regional Latino ministry? Because, it turns out Grace has got a piece. Jose, I know that last time Philomena, was it?
Is a Christchurch gypsy.
Yeah, and, how are we connected to that? Because there might be SL classes up in Pine Plains, but they're not necessarily connected to your church fair. I mean, you had a group yesterday down at Grace, your parishioners. Who's helping to coordinate that, whose function might that be?
We don't have we haven't had one. I think part of that job is going to be the new kind of a congregation of vitality, Altagracia Perez. Although her job is not only focused on Latino ministry, she's really looking at the whole of the diocese. Yamili Baschod was tapped as a staff person for Latino ministry training. So her job is really actually develop training and go out and train those congregations who would like to do start Latino ministry or having some kind of issues in the Latino ministry. She's the consulting person. So perhaps Emily is the one in that regard. In that sense, if you want to coordinate some effort, find ways to
So
start a new one.
To like if we gathered,
Yep.
she might come,
Yep.
and we spend some time,
Yeah.
maybe even in
She would be the-
afternoon, thinking about collaborative.
Yeah, she would actually might be the person, because she's the one who will provide training and consultation to those who are engaged or would like to engage in Latino Hispanic ministry.
There's prison ministry, Ecclesia is across the river, right? I noticed
Yes.
I ran into somebody from Newburgh. Do we do anything like that in this here?
Ecclesia is basically a street ministry in Newburgh.
Right, some sort of mass in the grass kind of thing. They had one in New Haven, I think it came out of Boston originally.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I'm sure
also,
they do.
And,
I'd like to see a better organization of retired clergy, because I think that's a tremendous resource for other parishes, where maybe retired clergy would want to volunteer to help parishes, not on a paid basis, but they could be consultants, they could help with fundraising, they could help with stewardship programs, they could help with teaching programs, and they're all there,
yeah.
rather than just be a list of supply clergy. There's much more that they can do.
About how many retired clergy are in?
I haven't a clue.
We don't have, actually, we have some, I don't think we
Well,
have really that many.
Hundreds. I think there are a lot.
I think there's a bunch. Michael and Joanna Schaefer was hosting a group, they're fairly active people, and
The convention, they're called a convention, and the list of clergy not entitled to vote in the back of it. Because they can be retired and supplying and vote, but if they don't report that, they just get stuck back there, so if you.
So how do you envision, when you say better organization, how do you envision that?
First thing I'd ask is, what clergy would be interested in doing this? And what do you have to offer?
Right.
I think I could offer use of buildings, I could help with stewardship, I could help teaching classes, And if there are clergy who have musical backgrounds, I'm sure they could help with that.
That's a great idea.
Where are you now?
Pardon?
Where are you?
I'm in Beacon. I'm the vicar of St. Luke's in Beacon, but I'm only going there 2 days a week.
One of the problems is that there is no person in the diocese with the responsibility of retired people, retired clergy.
The Oak doesn't.
Who?
The Oak doesn't.
The diocese does not have
Doesn't
anybody.
have one.
And it's one of the few dioceses even doesn't have anybody attached with the national church in the retired, because I checked on that. New York was one of the ones that did not have anybody responsible.
They could be, I worked at a speakers bureau. A lot of colleges have speakers bureaus, and the professors go out and they talk about their particular subject. We could do the same thing.
That would be great.
Hmm?
That would be great. As someone who, preaches every week, it would be a huge help to have somebody
talking-
come in.
your
somebody
age is
who's-
so
4 times a year would be such a relief.
That would, yeah. Just
What about
that,
these
just
chaplains
that.
too? There's a few chaplains in some of the school systems. Are they integrated into our clericus? Isn't there one in Vassar? Isn't there one,
Oh, yeah,
Jennifer at Vassar is,
But-
over
Oh,
across,
that's
is,
there's a guy in Trinity Pauling?
Jennifer.
There's somebody in
Jennifer's
Trinity
at Pauling.
Pauling too?
But she has a church. I mean, in terms of on-the-ground help that he's describing, that Ed's describing, I don't think they would be particularly useful. But, I have a retired Methodist minister in my congregation, and it's great because I can ask him to preach. And it's a huge help, and I would love to have, another few retired priests in my congregation, particularly of my tradition. That would be a huge help. But short of that, something like this would be really,
Yeah.
really great. And I have a feeling you guys are out there. It's so dependent on personal relationships that I don't have, that I don't know who you all are. And unless I have a relationship with you like I do with Paul or Elliot, sometimes I can ask you guys for help. But unless I have a relationship already, I don't know.
Well, it would be nice if
Do
we
you,
had
do you,
Mr. Retired
as
clergy
retired
would be
clergy,
interested
do
in this.
you
Yeah, sure.
occasionally meet together, and do you,
We don't meet together as retired
but
clergy.
do you have a?
We have different organizations like.
Isn't there a chaplain for retired clergy?
It used to be, but he retired.
He retired and didn't get replaced.
Because there used to be a clericus for retired clergy.
What if they I don't
Yeah,
know
because
that.
I
It was an
went to
IPC.
talk with it once.
Well,
It sounds like you retired folks need to organize yourself and start
Well,
networking.
these things come and go, they come
They
and go.
do, they do.
And up until Bishop Ryan's day, we had the diocese was carefully divided into 3 regions, and each region had an archdeacon, but he wanted a bishop in each one. Well, bishops have different interests than archdeacons do when you get right down to it. And the archdeacon we had here knew all this kind of stuff, and he was always just doing it on an informal basis.
Okay.
Well, New York's a funny diocese too, in that I've been in dioceses where retired clergy were expected to be part of the local parish, not working. They were retired, and they became part and molded into the local, local parish.
Many parishes have non-stipendiary associated. I'm technically an associated priest at St. Paul's,
Oh, okay.
Tivoli. But you look at St. Thomas Fifth Avenue, they'll have 7 or 8 retired clergy.
Right, but everybody
But
wants
so
to be
clear
connected
as
to
a
that.
city.
St. Nick's
So
doesn't
what you do
like
is
that
you-
kind of
you-
shit.
You're inviting
Universities are
buildings,
buildings.
retired clergy to be associate priests.
I think, well, actually, we could start this now. Any of you, I see 3, 4 folks who are retired.
Well, they're associated.
Well, they're all
Yeah, I can see them
No,
hugging.
no, but one person who would take, at least in this area, to be the person to gather all the names and emails and phone numbers, contact of those retired clergy in this area who might be available, and distribute to all the parish clergy. Because whenever there is, this is what I found. When I was in Long Island, I had really hard time finding a supply. But as you go out more east, out of Long Island, you just forget it. Queens and Brooklyn, yes, there are actually too many of them. So then I by chance, I met this one retired clergy who said, well, I'm actually the chaplain to the retired clergy, and you want to supply, you contact me, I'll get you one.
Wow.
And that's exactly how it happened. Every time I need a supply, I emailed him, and he would circulate my email to his network, and then I would get a supply.
But that's supply for which your church paid, I assume, and
Yeah.
and I don't want to assume that retired people, except that Ed just mentioned that they might be willing, but I don't want to assume that they're willing to do this kind of work for free, but that's the only way. We have a supply budget,
Yeah.
but outside of, I mean, the only way we could have somebody help outside of that is by doing it for free. We don't have a budget for
Yeah.
Bible study,
Well,
teaching, classes.
Yeah.
that'll have to be worked out.
Yeah.
Michael,
That can all be
even,
worked out.
maybe don't pay them a stipend, maybe just pay their cost there.
Right,
Their,
yeah.
their transportation.
Travel, yeah.
That's probably.
And they do the actual teaching for nothing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or a
I just think this.
Or a
goes
budget
off
that's a little lower than supply costs, and they would not, unless they were actually supplying, in which case they'd get the going rate, but if they were just guest preaching, what would that
They wouldn't
budget be?
they wouldn't,
That be?
the retirers would not be depending on getting money, because he has a pension.
Mhm.
And so it's not that he really needs it. I think they could get more.
For yourself?
Well.
Pronoun is the opposite term. For most women, we can't afford it.
Depends on the situation.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, one of the other areas with retired clergy is what happens to them when they do retire. I mean, it's a tough, it can be a tough 3, 4, 5 months. You know, when you come home, you say to your wife, any phone calls from me today? And she says, no. But I know one clergy minister who's retired out of the area, and he had a very tough time.
It's hard. It's tough.
And to the point where he was even thinking of going to the Hudson Bridge. So we got him help and things worked out. But just, you know, that whole trauma.
Yeah.
And I called the diocese to see what help I had, and they go, help. I get no support from the diocese at all.
Mm.
Which is another area, there's so many areas in the diocese, in all sorts of areas. We used to have people in charge of Christian education, youth work, whole, that you can go to as resources. To my knowledge, none of them are there anymore.
Well, I think when you get into sort of that kind of pastoral care area of the retired clergy, I think the person, we do have actually a person who really ought to be doing some of that work is Canon for Pastoral Care, Shin person. Her charge is to look after the clergy of this diocese. That I assume includes retired clergy too. So if there's an issue where with someone who is beginning retirement has really difficulty adjusting and needs some pastoral care and somebody to look in, she's the person actually. That would be my assumption. That would be the person I go to. And don't take no for an answer, because we do have a person who is paid to do that kind of work.
How about you? There's only 2 bishops now.
Yeah.
You guys must have a lot of load.
There's maybe a lot of time on your hand, doesn't it? No.
Disabuse
It's a big load.
Busy schedule and all that?
It is pretty busy. I find it's a very different kind of busy. I mean, you know, parish work is busy too, but on the whole, as a parish priest, you're busy in your local area, except for any diocesan commitments that you may have. As a bishop, what I find is I'm traveling a lot. I mean, I have, you know, not just, I'm involved in, you know, a couple of, you know, parish situations at the moment, which almost opposite ends of the diocese, and also meetings, which can be not just at the cathedral, but at various locations. A lot of sort of evening functions that I'm expected to show up. So yeah, it's a huge
Time sink.
time-consuming thing. Yes. this, I think I've had one Saturday off since September. I think Bishop Ditch is the same. And then there are days, Sundays, where I have two churches. I remember convention, I had a convention, and then on Sunday I had two churches. So I got home like 7 o'clock at night, and I felt so horrible to my wife, you know, because I was literally gone for 3 days, you know.
Bishop D.G. had the same schedule. We were the second church he came to
Yeah.
the day after convention.
I was like, wow, this guy's working hard.
So it's, for the moment, there's very little we can do about it. Diocese, we don't have enough money to have an assisting bishop at the moment. And Bishop D.G. is aware, and he said, well, we're just going to have to plow through and until
I brought this up with a cleric's meeting with the presiding bishop in New York. And my suggestion was to let parish priests confirm their own children. And the bishop being the confirmation machine, is going from place to place, having all these appointments, could spend much more time pastorally. And then we know the Lutheran Church does it.
Well, I mean, to be honest, actually, parish visits are the best part of my job. It really is.
Don't take it away, Ed.
You know, so don't take it away from me.
I'm not taking away the parish visit at all.
And
I think they make the parish visit more extensive than just to confirm.
Oh, no, we do more than that, yeah. I mean, it is a visitation, it comes with a whole slew of schedule that goes from, 9 in the morning or whatever, and then I arrive until, meeting with the vestry and the clergy until 2, 3 in the afternoon. So it's not, it's not just going and confirm and be done with it. It's more than that. And that is a really, really important part. Because some churches you get a bishop every year, but most parishes you get once every 3 years.
No, once
2 or
every
3 years.
What's
2
every
years? 2 years?
How many parishes in this?
198 or 99.
Let me do the math.
There's a new one now.
Yeah.
I think a number of us are interested in your telling us what you feel comfortable telling us about the status of general and your work there.
My involvement with general is very, very tangential, and in fact, the only involvement I had was with the Alumni Association, and they invited me to come and facilitate a conversation during the alumni conference. Other than that, I'm not directly involved in the reconciliation process. The Lombard Institute is coming and is doing that. General is quiet at the moment, and they're back to sort of day-to-day, managing day-to-day business and their classes, but it's very fragile, and we have no idea, in fact, which direction it will go. I happened to just know, yesterday I heard that there are 3 possible new students, MD students that are signed up for next year. I was kind of surprised. 3? Yeah. I was kind of surprised. I thought it would be 0, frankly. But 3 from the bishops, the diocese where the bishops are still supportive and want to support general. I don't think it's going to go any more than them. At most, maybe 5. I thought it would be 0 next year, but they've got next year. They're going to have total, as it stands, they'll have a total of 90 students. That's not sustainable for seminary, so we have no idea at the moment. the reconciliation, the mediation process, the Lombard Peace Center is doing, I think they're working very hard to do it very fast. Unfortunately, they do have to do it fast because I think that the board and the faculty still need to reach some kind of negotiation next spring, because all the faculty was stripped of their tenure. And what will happen, my understanding is that because the mediation has come in and so they've asked basically standstill agreement is where they are. So any sort of legal negotiation is on standstill. There's nothing happening. So that work, I'm sure, will need to happen at some point, not after the mediation process. So yeah, I mean, we're still holding our breath and watching. Actually, it is still very, very fragile. But I think the students and who are there now are taking their one day at a time ginger steps to make it work. And I think all we can do is just continue to pray for them and let the mediation take its course. I think is the best way to do it.
On that cheerful note.
I was going to bring up actually one thing that I thought maybe you might take on, and I would like to see actually all the clericals do this. Bishop Dici called for conversation around healthy congregation, and which will, and the whole, and it's all in conjunction in his sort of organic vision endowment process, and this whole conversation around healthy congregation all going to come together and to serve as our diocesan-wide conversation on visioning, strategic vision. And I thought about this, and I think maybe that conversation about healthy congregation actually needs to take place every level, not just parish on the parish level, but in the clericus, like when you gather. What would make a healthy congregation as a clericus? And I suggested also this to Bishop Dici, that we should have that conversation in the diocesan staff, and then bring all the diocesan staff together and say, what would be a healthy congregation of the diocesan staff look like? And because I think that's a conversation that needs to take place at every level, organically, and this group is a little bit different from parish community. What would a healthy congregation of clericus clergy group look like? What is it?
Should we accept that as an agenda topic for our January meeting?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, anybody want to object? Did you want to object, Ed?
No, I think I agree. There's a sense of humor.
Well,
A sense of humor.
I'll offer to host the January meeting. I like being here and don't particularly want to go back to Antonella's, so let's do it at St. Paul's in Poughkeepsie in January.
What day?
I'll have to circulate it. I gotta look at the dean's meeting calendar and let you know. That's okay.
Okay, one item.
Ma'am.
I've had some conversation with Richard Witt about doing a program during Lent. And we're talking about doing something that would involve questions of immigration, but broadening the topic to talk about borderlands, and borderlands in those times of transitions, you know, and the transitions that go on for the borders of countries, but also the borders of our lives, and maybe borders of parishes, who knows? Anyways, I'm just in an initial conversation with him about doing it during Lent. And I guess I'm wondering if there's parishes that might be interested in, you know, trying to do something together. I don't know if that would mean a movable feast. You know, in other words, you know, doing it at different congregations, you know, doing it different, you know, like 4 sessions, but in 4 different places, or, you know, what it might look like. But if anybody's interested, I'd be willing to, you know, more than happy to, you know, keep in the
We
mix.
used to do that with some success in that. I mean, there'd be, one would be at here, one would be at Christchurch, one at St. Andrews and St. Paul's, and it worked very, very smoothly.
We would be interested in St. Paul's.
I would think we would. Okay, well, I'll get some emails.
But it needs to be central if you're gonna include all this, the whole county. You know, if it-
Well, I don't know, I mean, sometimes an adventure to the north or the south is kind of, makes it more exciting and new and fresh. All the way down to Fishkill even.
That's it.
Like to keep it,
It opens our horizons.
doable, that if we're talking about 4 sessions, for instance, maybe, you know, put them in such a way that.
When you introduced that topic, it rang a bell for me of Al Rodriguez's video on Saturday at the New Camino. And he took the biblical references to immigration, took them apart and put them back together. It was really moving and I assume applicable.
And we have, by the way, those of us who went to that have connections to the downloads.
The
So
Dropbox,
people
right?
couldn't go and need the connections to the downloads, we probably could make them available.
That is a great
They're in a
idea.
Dropbox, I don't know how that,
It's a great idea, Joe.
we'd be interested too.
because, you know, I thought it was a very good conference, and I had to leave early, but maybe those because they've been available, I hope they are.
I hope you'll push it, that's a good idea.
But I'd be happy to talk with Richard and then
Great.
put some people in an email, we'll see what we can pull together.
Terrific.
I have a few things.
She's got support
And you can
secretaries too.
Well, how many?
Sure.
No.
I've got several things. One, I've been asked to organize a pilgrimage to Taizé for youth and young adults, particularly of this region, of the Mid-Hudson region. And so Allison
Allison.
of Stonebridge and I are working together on that. And so we have chosen dates of the 30th of July to the 9th of August. We're particularly looking to take youth and young adults, and we're thinking of young adults to like 35 years old.
You say young adults, how young?
Juniors in high school,
So 16 and
sophomores, juniors.
16.
So 20 years.
I thought that they were saying that 17 was the cutoff when you were talking with the Taizé people, but that, not so?
No, if there are, for instance, there are some parents who are willing to go, then we can take,
16
yeah, 16.
Without parents, 16,
Yes,
Without parents, 17.
17.
With parents, 16.
17.
17, 16.
I know you have another thing or two, but speaking of that, you were speaking earlier of the trip possibly on the 50th anniversary of Jonathan. Daniels, and I'd like to hear more about that.
Okay, sure. The other thing is that in cooperation with Civilizations Exchange Foundation, which is run by Imam Bashar Arafat, who spoke at convention, you might remember back in 2010. He and I are leading an interfaith study program to Indonesia in August, so that's another thing. And this information is out on our website. The other thing is that last Friday night, I had the opportunity to go to the Veterans Arts Showcase, which was held at the FDR Museum and Library. Fantastic experience. Immersed me into a whole different dimension of ministry. It has to do with moral injury heard that term used. When we usually think about the damage that's done to veterans, we usually think of physical damage, you know, loss of arms, legs, head injuries, so forth. We often think about post-traumatic stress, that range of psychological injury. We also often think about relational conflicts that they have when they return, having difficulty reintegrating into their family life, getting a job, et cetera, et cetera. But there's now another category that's been identified as moral injury. And this has to do with the kind of soul, spiritual damage that happens when individuals have been, when they have had a sense of their moral principles being violated. Okay, when they have gone across the line of moral boundaries, and the kind of shame that happens as a result of that. So it's psychological, but it's also spiritual, and they're calling it a kind of soul damage that happens. So there are groups that have formed to help people through that. And it's certainly a spiritual dimension, because a lot of it has to do with confession and absolution. It really does. And so there are groups that are in this area that have been formed to help veterans through that type of internal injury. And so I have a few flyers about where those groups are being held. But I've come to find great respect for that work that's being done. And it's something that I don't think we've really been aware of to the degree that it's being raised to the surface. But it's something that I think as faith communities, it's important for us to become aware of and to maybe learn how to minister to that as well. Am I making it clear about the distinction?
Yeah.
Soul, moral injury. What was powerful about this is that they had 50 or so different works of art, paintings, sculpture, done by veterans. And then there were several who had composed poems, and there was music that was also presented. So the arts were used as a way of both expression and a way of means of healing too. So I was asked to do an invocation, but also to do a presentation to address this.
Is this an ongoing exhibit that's there?
No, it was just a one-time exhibit apparently. But the sessions are ongoing, okay? There was a chaplain there who was Universalist, Unitarian, here in I think he's in Orange County. He was a military chaplain in Afghanistan, who, after having experienced the trauma of troops, et cetera, the way he put it, the context was that there's a ceremony that's done when troops are being returned, fallen troops who are returned to the States, and then there's a similar ceremony that's done in Dover when they arrive back in the United States. And so as a chaplain, he had presided over these ceremonies. And at one point, I suppose it was in Afghanistan, when he was doing this, he looked over into another area, and there were drums. And so the juxtaposition of drums and what they symbolize, and the ceremonial stuff that he was doing in respect for these falling soldiers collided. And as a result of that, on Veterans Day, he did a sermon, which was really in the form of a confession. And it was interesting because he read it, and he begins with our confession, most merciful God, we confess, da, 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 da. And then he goes on from there. Well, it it's a confession. He says it's a Veterans Day confession of America. And he brings to the surface issues in this confession that are not easily heard, which led to him being ousted from the service. Okay, and so his ministry now, though he is a congregational minister, parish priest, parish minister, most of his work now is being done in running these groups to help heal.
You know, Masood, if you find out about this kind of session occurring,
Yes.
why don't you just email all the clergy in a particular area so they can let it be known to people in their congregation?
I will
Because
do
they're
that.
likely to have people in their congregation that would benefit greatly.
I
And
will.
not merely military personnel. With my experience just recently, that personnel who are corrections officers
Yes.
very often have exactly the same
Same
experiences.
concept.
I was dealing with one about 6 weeks ago, 5 or 6 weeks ago,
Yes.
who has, and it was dealt with a person, a violent person with AIDS who was in prison.
Yes.
And he has carried a weight of guilt around on him for 30 years since then. It was-
There was a medic who was there, a medic who was not really doing the fighting, but who was experiencing and witnessing the level of violence and having to deal with this, who wrote a poem, which is incredible.
There was also a study done on ritual acts and returning of military. It's a study that was done on Japanese soldiers coming back after World War II. And the community welcoming them back and doing a ritual in which they put down the marks of soldier and took up the marks of civilian to really, you know, make that transition, but it was communally done. I have a prisoner who's involved in this. Castle Point, someone asked where Castle Point is. It's about 8 miles down this road right here, 9D. It is a huge veterans hospital and nursing home, and they closed it down. They closed parts of it down at one point, but they've opened massive sections of it up. It's a huge veterans facility down the road.
I will do that.
I've consulted with my,
address book, it's sent to them.
consulted with my phone, and I've got the dean's meeting date, so January 27th would be the next clericus date at noon at St. Paul's in Poughkeepsie.
At noon.
January 27th.
Same
January
arrangement.
27th.
We cough up to help cover the cost
Is
of
that,
that.
there's all the flyers
I'll
here?
send, that's all I have.
Okay. Chris is the chaplain, he's a neighbor of mine.
27.
Right down the
27.
street from here.
Okay.
Chris Tall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
so just
yeah.
for what it's
You can rub the
worth,
other
yeah, he lives
Eastern
right
Duchess
I just
clericus,
walking
cleric I
there, yeah,
know.
he's in Dot.
The other person that might be interesting, the Roman Catholic priest of Holy Trinity, Father Robert, is an Army chaplain who's
Was
used
it?
in Iraq.
Who, Brother Robert? No, Father Robert.
Father Robert,
Where is he now? I'm sorry.
Holy Trinity in Poughkeepsie.
Okay.
He's a Roman Catholic.
Okay.
I don't know if he's doing anything with veterans groups, but.
I was seeing tonight at the Interfaith Council.
Is there a plan for this trip?
Yes, there is, they haven't met, it's really organized by Carla Burns. Remember, she's the one who was given the Bishop's Cross. She's the chair of the Anti-Racism Committee of the diocese, and she's been organizing this. And no, it's been kind of small group, like, you know, usually geared toward, you know, youth, kids in high school. But I'm hearing a lot of interest for next year, especially being the 50th anniversary of Jonathan Daniels' martyrdom. So,
Travel where?
to Alabama, Haynesville, Alabama, where he was killed. And it's been going on for quite, I forget how many years now, for a good many years down there. The pilgrimage where, the storefront where he was shot, and they they go from there and march to the courthouse where the guy who killed him was exonerated in 2 hours. And so they do a Eucharist there in the courthouse, actually. Inside the courthouse, yeah.
It was a pilgrimage, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So the day for that is August 15th, and I will talk to Carla Burns to maybe start planning it much earlier and planning it a little bit bigger than it has been, knowing that more people would be interested in attending. The way she's been doing this is that she's taken this small group, about 12 or 14, 12, 15 young people. We're flying from LaGuardia, it's like 5 o'clock flight, 5 in the morning, fly into Atlanta. And from there it goes straight to Martin Luther King Jr. Museum in Atlanta. Have lunch there and then check into a hotel in Atlanta. And then the next day, fly down and then drive down to, because it would be a smaller group, so they rented a car, they rented a couple of cars. Drive down to Birmingham, Alabama, where there's a civil rights institute, which is absolutely the best museum I've ever seen. It is interactive. There's a lot of stuff there. Very educational. Really, really good. Just that there's a video after video of all footages of civil rights, and it's amazing. And then that's Birmingham, and then they spend a day, a night at a church a Session church in Montgomery. Adults stay in a hotel. Kids have a sleepover with the local teens, local youth group, and they have an evening of fun and games, but also discussion and conversation about a lot of whole civil rights, and basically. And then we also make a stop at Selma, where the bridge, where they had to do with the voting rights for the African Americans. And there's also a little museum there too, which is very interesting, and they walk the bridge over. And then we go to Haneyville, Alabama, where Jonathan Daniels was killed. So if you want, I mean, people have the option of just going down to just for that pilgrimage, so that day, August 15th, to Haneyville, and then just do that. But also have the opportunity to sort of travel, do this 4-day travel.
Carl will be doing this again?
Yes, and so she might need to sort of put out the feeler earlier, and then organize it so that if it's a bigger group, I'm sure there'll be a lot of hotel organization, and maybe we may need to rent a bus or something like that to get enough people.
So would we contact her directly, because I know that August 15, at this point, many people in my parish with kids that age have already made plans. You know, if I don't announce a summer event a year ahead, I can't, I lose half.
I'll tell her right away, so that beginning of the year, she sends it out, and just
Yeah.
flyer made up, and
Yeah, and she does this every year, so if I were to
Yeah.
aim to get my people involved for
yeah,
16.
you can email her direct and
16.
find out, actually. Ask
I
her.
will.
But I know that I and Allison also, when I talked to her last week, because our youth group joined with Stone Restaurant and St. John's Kingston to go to Appalachia last summer. And they're sort of like, what, go back there again or Navajo
Yeah.
again? But I was like, okay, how about this, let's make it more confusing. Jonathan Daniels. So she is interested, and I, at least on coordinating a youth group in this region.
Yeah.
So if
Great.
anybody wants to get along, I think that would be a matter of announcing it before the end of the year so people can put it on their calendar. Two, having at least 4 meetings together so that the kids can form a team and learn about some of these issues. And I'll be happy to be part of that.
I'd like to be part of that too. So if I can drum up.
There's
If you got a couple kids, from a bunch,
There's a
then it's
book.
quite doable.
on Jonathan Daniels, biography of Jonathan Daniels, which It's not easy to get. You can get it through Amazon only through used books, because I think it's out of print. It is one of the best book on civil rights, actually. It's not just about Jonathan Downs. This book covers the whole thing in a really, really incredibly detailed, nice way.
There's a new film coming out. I saw the ads last night,
Yeah.
on Martin Luther King, I
Yeah.
think, in
Oh, yeah.
December. It looks pretty powerful.
Great.
Well, the 50th is, you know, it just so happens Douglas had known him, I guess.
Oh, really?
And certainly talked about him at Grace, and they've raised money for a Jonathan Daniels stained glass window, along with a local fellow named Charlie Jansen, an African-American who saved 9 people at the cost of his own life in Vietnam. And so I think as the 50th comes on, and this project builds up speed, I want to make that connection.
Yeah. No, that would be really, really good. I think, especially in the kind of tragic incidents that we've been seeing around the sort of racial issues, I think it's a really important ministry and witness that we should consider. I'm still very, very heavy-hearted about what's going on with the verdict, grand jury verdict in Ferguson, and what already happened. There was a huge sort of, not big, but there was a huge incident last night, and who knows how long it'll continue. But people who don't see this as a really national issue and the undergirding issue of racism, that they're really blind, they're in denial, I think. I was listening to radio, NPR program today on Brian Lehrer show, and there's one call-in who was probably a cop himself, brought up some really good points, about, well, Michael Brown was no saint. I mean, he apparently robbed a liquor store that night, beat up, a worker there, and he was, cops were out, his name was out there, and that's how Darrell Wilson found him and went after him. So, he did make a good point in terms for this case. Let's not just demonize Darrell Wilson. Malcolm Brown was no good kid either, if you look at it this way. And he was trying to make a case that, well, part of it is his own fault, that he got himself into that kind of trouble, and blah, blah, blah. So there was a whole discussion about that. But what the conversation cannot just be about just this incident. It is, people are upset and angry because of it's been going on for so long, especially down in St. Louis County. It's some of the things that the laws that are coming out of that county is appalling. Did you know that down there the cops can actually shoot somebody that is running away? They have the right, legal right, allowance to shoot somebody from the back, somebody who's running away. It's unbelievable to me. So there's obviously in that particular part, there is a legal system that is completely, outdated and just not working. But the issue is obviously greater. I just wanted to share with this one article that I came across in New Republic. Recently, it's called "The Science of Suffering," I think there's a lot of spiritual and theological implications, because we've known that spirituality is handed down from generation to generation, right? This is given for us, but for scientists, this is a whole new thing. They're discovering and realizing, wow, And it says that the children of the traumatized have always carried their parents' suffering under their skin. We've known that. That is what liberation theology is all about. So science is validating what theologians have already known. This is a good article, good article to interact with, I think.
Where is
for
that?
us.
It's
New Republic,
the current one?
yeah, and you go onto their website, you can still find it. It's called, the article is called The Science of Suffering.
Science.
The Science of Suffering is called, and it's a long article, but it's very, very good. I found that it is kind of scientifically validating all the things that we theologians have been talking about for years, you know.
Chief theologian, I was asked by a parishioner this morning for a biblical verse. He said, you know, take a day. So my friend is going through all of this suffering on account of what he thinks he's doing right, but it's not going to be resolved justly. How can I quote him something from Scripture that says you should do it anyway?
Forgive them, for they don't know what they do.
Well, I said, Jesus is a good example.
It is a good example.
But I said, I think the Paul and, you know, suffering, he was on it, but,
There's Paul, and there's some Psalms, I think, Psalm 22, some, all those, you know.
collective wisdom.
They hurl their lips and wag their
Very good
tongues.
times. There we go.
Pulling all day there with the soldier in it. Sure, you should go through it.
Anyway, well, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate the time with you, and for gathering together. Thank you, and thank you for the assembly.